Hello, welcome to joining us for the Azure Unplugged Red Hat Workloads on Azure session. I'm Nicholas Strauss-Matos. I'm joined with Jim Zimmerman and Michael Curtis. I'm a cloud strategy evangelist at Red Hat. Jim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm a cloud native black belt on the Azure team, and used to be the PM for Azure Red Hat OpenShift.
Awesome. And then Michael, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure, Michael Curtis, principal architect and alliance partner for Azure and Red Hat.
Awesome. So before we move straight into the Q&A, we're just going to go over a couple slides. We're not going to bore you to death, but just to get everybody a little bit up to speed with the relationship that we have and the things that we actually offer between Red Hat and Microsoft. So I'm going to move into the next slide. So one of the things we get asked all the time is like, why Red Hat and Microsoft? Why do we have this strategic partnership? Why does this exist, right? And, you know, realistically, it exists because our customers asked for it. Jim, do you want to kind of chime in on that a little bit?
Yeah, so our customers expect us to meet them where they're at, right? And, a lot of our customers use a lot of our partner solutions, and Red Hat happens to be one of the partners that we have that we have a lot of mutual customers. And so we decided to meet where the customers are at and join Red Hat.
Yeah, awesome. So really, we're working together for our customers, right? As Jim was saying, we're trying to take a collaborative approach, both from a go-to-market and engineering strategy. So we have a lot of collaborative engineering. We deal with a lot of things together when it comes to security. We're trying to do unified management of infrastructure. So that could be things like Azure Arc that we're trying to tie together, as well as other things like container capabilities. We know that everybody's really looking at Kubernetes as being like the next generation of application distribution and management. So we're trying to really simplify that with like solutions like Red Hat OpenShift and bringing that on Azure. It's like Azure Red Hat OpenShift, but also a lot of interoperable app dev capabilities as well. So tying in things like Azure Devops into those different solutions. And this is great both for our customers and also for our partners, because we have a lot of partners who are constantly asking us and saying, well, we wish that there wasn't so many verticals and that we could have more horizontal integration or control plane integration in these different solutions. So really, we're focused on cloud infrastructure. That would be like cloud migration, data center augmentation, application innovation. So that could be net new greenfield cloud native development, and then application modernization. And then obviously a big thing that everybody's looking at is data, artificial intelligence, automation, machine learning. Over the years, we've collected so much data that we're now starting to get to a point where we're trying to find better and more useful ways to use this data to actually make decision management processes or to even streamline customer experiences. So here are just an example of some of the different solutions that we actually offer on Azure. We have more than are listed here, but these are the ones that we're kind of showcasing for the most part. Red Hat Enterprise Linux, Red Hat OpenShift on Azure, and Azure Red Hat OpenShift, which is a managed service offering, SQL Server on Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and then obviously a lot of people don't even know that we have this, but we have SAP solutions like SAP HANA on RHEL, specifically on Azure. So I guess from this point we'll just kind of open it up for some general Q&A. We'll leave this slide up just to for those of you that are interested in kind of taking a peek at it. And then we'll share these slides after as well. But we'll open it up for some Q&A questions if anybody wants to specifically, post some of them in there, or feel free. I guess while we wait for some of those, Jim, like in your experience, when it comes to solutions like, Azure Red Hat OpenShift, right? OpenShift is like super popular for customers that are running it on-prem. But customers that are looking and moving to Microsoft Azure, what would be like a customer that would really be able to take advantage of a solution like ARO or Azure Red Hat OpenShift?
So, so the majority of our customers that are interested in using ARO usually have OpenShift on-prem, or OCP is the acronym for it. And a lot of times they're looking to really extend their workloads from on-prem. They need more capacity at their current data centers, or maybe their lease is up for their data center and they need to move out in the next year or two, and they're looking for a solution. They're looking for something that they could, they don't know how much compute they need yet. And so Arrow really helps with, having that kind of per hour consumption based model, right? So they're not having to pre-plan everything with their existing applications, and also with app modernization, they don't quite know how much they're going to use yet. And so a lot of these customers love to use Arrow because they get to kind of play around with it and figure out what they need first, and then develop as they go. And then sometimes they'll even just keep their on-prem and also in the cloud, and they have this nice hybrid environment.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. One thing I get asked often, and it'd be really, interesting to get your perspective on it, is a lot of customers that I meet with of all sizes, right? Enterprise to mid-market, doesn't even really matter. They always ask, should I just go Kubernetes, should I just go containers first when I'm moving to Azure, or does it make sense for me to kind of like take my applications, move them into Azure, and then refactor them? Any best practices that you kind of seen on that, in your experience with some of the big companies that you've worked with?
Yeah, so the big companies I've been working with that already have an OpenShift presence, they already have apps running in there. The best practice for them is to migrate the existing apps as they are, and then begin to refactor them. Maybe they've decided that they've been running data inside of a cluster for a while, and now that they're in the cloud, they maybe can move to more of a managed Postgres or managed MySQL or managed messaging queue system. The more they start to move to the cloud, the more they realize, well, wait, should I be managing this data in the cluster, or should I have a separate managed service to do that? The easiest way to do it is to kind of just lift and shift what you have today. That way you can see it working, you see that there's really not much difference. And then you start extracting out, like maybe the data goes and lives over here and all that. And it makes for a much better experience for the customer.
Yeah, so kind of like a crawl, walk, run approach, for the most part. Yeah, so take the low-hanging fruit, maybe some legacy applications that are at kind of end of life, move those, and then maybe even like, for example, like databases, right? Customers are always asking, like, what should I do with the database? Should I run that in a container? My aspect on it is always run that in an Azure managed, database, right? I mean, take advantage of any of the cloud native services that you possibly can, wherever, for simplification, but also for scalability. So we actually had a question that came in. Michael, what was the question? Oh, okay, I think I see it. It's what Azure offerings are going to be offered that are similar to the development environment like CRW? You want to take that one, Jim?
I would need a follow-up question with what is CRW? So yeah, I would love to answer it if I knew what CRW was, but
yeah, I'm not familiar with that acronym myself, so
would it be CDW? Maybe?
No, I think that would be if they were buying hardware, right?
Yeah, that's yeah. So okay, but anyway, back to the topic we were talking about with with migration. One new pattern I've been seeing emerging with this hybrid scenario is while they have OpenShift both on-prem and in the cloud, sometimes they don't have us manage it, so they're not using Arrow, they're just using OCP and Azure, which is fine as well. A lot of times they have existing licenses or subscriptions, Red Hat calls them, where they don't want to have to pay for Arrow, and so they'll just move their license to the cloud, and then they'll use Microsoft Arc, or Azure Arc, I think it's called. And they would use that to be able to distribute their applications across on-prem and in the cloud. And that could work with OCP or Arrow. And I'm beginning to see that as kind of a hybrid use case for some of these customers.
So basically customers using Azure Arc is like the control plane for deploying and managing their applications and so on and so forth, regardless of whatever it's tying into, whatever those environments are and where they live, right?
Right.
So the follow-up question to that, when they said CRW, that meant code-ready workspaces. So they were asking what Azure offerings are going to be offered that are similar to the development environment like code-ready workspaces.
So I think, Nick, and remind me, I don't remember what it's called, but don't you have some kind of code-ready workspaces built into OpenShift as well?
So we do natively, right?
Yeah.
So, obviously, whenever you're using OpenShift, whether it's ARO or standalone OpenShift, code-ready workspaces are already integrated into those pieces. I'm wondering if their question is more along the lines of, will they ever be able to get something like Azure Devops integrated directly into code-ready workspaces as an option, or or something of that nature, right? Which I think that would be really interesting. But we already have tight integration when it comes to Azure Devops. I mean, if you want to do development in Azure Devops, you would literally plug that directly into the OpenShift cluster and do the management and deployment of refactoring of your code and your CI/CD pipelines and all that other stuff natively within it. And I know that with code-ready workspaces directly from OpenShift, because we do have the operator and the integration of those components and pieces, they can actually deploy and consume native Azure services directly from CRW. So I think we already have most of that there. But it'd be interesting to see, like what our customers are looking for as far as tighter integration, or maybe they want to just be able to run code-ready workspaces directly on Azure natively without having to run it on OpenShift. Like, for example, code-ready workspaces on AKS.
Right. Yeah, and the code-ready workspaces should work with GitHub Actions as well. Right. So there is an integration there that could happen depending on where your repo is living. Right.
Yeah.
We have been working with GitHub Actions integrated with OpenShift and Arrow, as well as what you mentioned before. DevOps already works with Arrow and OCP on Azure. So
yeah.
I'm looking at one of the other questions, something about many companies who are moving to containerization have been struggling with pod level security. Someone looking for service mesh. Can we discuss that use case?
That is a complicated question.
To you, Nick. Yeah, I'll give that one to you since it's so complicated. No, but I mean, with Red Hat Service Mesh based on Istio, maybe you could touch on that a little bit, because it's one of the features I like about OpenShift is how opinionated OpenShift is, and the pieces that you've determined are kind of best of breed.
Yeah, I mean, well, we have a lot of different integrations with many different types of service mesh, whether it could be, Istio, I mean, Kiali, right? Saying service mesh is kind of high level at this point, right? We have an opinionated approach of using a combination of Kiali, Prometheus, Jaeger, and all these other things and stringing them together. Tying that into like the security aspect of it. I mean, obviously, anytime you're using a service mesh, it actually helps you uncover like specifically what's happening within your applications, like if there's any latency related issues, connectivity, basically the lay of the land for the most part. I think a combination of that, and then obviously using blessed containers or blessed pods, so you're just not pulling random stuff out of Docker Hub and tossing it on your, environment and saying, oh yeah, like this is totally 100% safe. Like I got it off the internet. It's got to be safe, right? I mean, that's you don't want to be like pulling down random images and running them with like privileged permissions, So I'll leave it at that. I don't know if you want to add anything to that specifically, but I mean, that's just my perspective on it.
Yeah, no, I mean, the one thing I could add to it that's a little bit outside of Arrow, but, obviously part of Azure is, we have Azure Front Door and App Gateway, which both have web application firewalls, right? So a lot of times what companies will do is they'll have these, private clusters that are running their various microservices using service mesh, and they need to be able to connect to them to the outside world. And they'll use something, like a WAF with Front Door to give public access to very specific services. And that's one way they secure them. This obviously is outside of Arrow and, any of our other services, but that seems to be the preferred way to secure their services.
So, one thing that I thought was really interesting too, I don't know if you Jim, you might not even have known that this even occurred. Like I think the announcement came out just earlier today that Microsoft announced that Azure Red Hat OpenShift is going to be part of the Azure Migration and Modernization Program. Did you hear about this?
Yeah, I did.
Why do you think that really, I mean, I'm super excited about it from the customer perspective, right? Because technical training being integrated, free access to cloud migration tools from Azure, access to in-depth assistance from Fast Track and Azure Engineering. Why should that matter to partners as well? I mean, why do you think that that's such a big thing?
Yeah, so, what's nice is the partners can take advantage of the same exact program that our own field takes advantage of, right? So think of it as like an extension to our field. In fact, IBM, who you might know, Nick, is, sorry, I had to do it. So they are one of our partners that have just begun taking advantage of the program already, right? Because, as a partner of Microsoft's, you get all of the benefits that our field gets too. You get access to the fast track engineers, you get some training, There's dollars behind it to help, migrate, help to get POCs stood up and everything. So it's great for, partners as well.
Yeah. I was super excited just because it incentivizes really everyone to leverage that Azure Migration Modernization Program, right? It benefits the customer, it benefits the partner, really benefits everybody really at the end of the day. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, did you hear that we had this big announcement for the Red Hat OpenShift data science stuff that came out as well?
No, I haven't, but let's pause on that real quick because I want to hear more about that. There is a question: what's the advantage of moving to Microsoft over like Oracle Cloud or AWS? And I think we just answered one of the key points was what we just mentioned with this Azure migration and modernization program, right? Yeah. Because we have engineers, we have training, there's money behind it to help with the POCs and things like that. And so right there, I think is one of the best answers. And we answered the question before we read it. So.
Not only that, but just think of the level of collaboration that we have from an engineering and security perspective, right? Like, for example, with Red Hat and Microsoft, we have the whole ticket exchange program, right? So like it's federated support, there's Red Hat engineers alongside Microsoft engineers. We don't have that with anyone else. We don't have that with any other cloud provider. We only have that specifically with Microsoft. And I think that really, it brings that whole better together type of scenario. We're also working on getting more and more applications being, cloud native and being able to be purchased directly from the marketplace, right? So SQL Server, I know we're working on SAP solutions for Azure on that, obviously ARO, being able to burn down those commitments with ACR. So a customer doesn't have to constantly, have multiple contracts with like Red Hat and Microsoft. They could just procure everything through Microsoft, which really at the end of the day, that's what our customers are saying that they want to do, have a single line item, a single billing statement, and have a commitment with a discount specifically through one provider. So I think it really, it ties into the whole like best of breed, first class, white glove type of service that everyone's really looking for, right? And again, I always go back to it, but I think it's important to focus on the fact that this isn't just enterprise customers, like the biggest of the bigs, the multi-billion-dollar companies. This also really helps mid-sized market, companies as well, or startups that are going to eventually become like the next big conglomerates. They could already get started as a cloud-native type of solution and have that level of experience, with Red Hat and Microsoft really be seamless for the most part.
Yeah, and just to add to that a little bit too, we're working on some very, very big customers together. And it's almost like we're an extended team between Red Hat and Microsoft. There's a black belt team also now with Red Hat that works with me and some of the accounts. And think of us as like tiger teams where we go in, we unblock the customers, we solve the problems, and then we also teach our field how to do the same thing, right? So that we can scale this, so that they can also give that great experience to the customers.
Well, and all the partner training as well too, right? Having such like trusted partners like Accenture and Infosys out there to be able to go and act, on behalf of customers and be a trusted advisor for both companies, right? Because we have strong strategic alliances with those partners as well. So great.
So back to the topic on data science. What was the announcement that you were going to mention?
Yeah, so we released it's called RHODS or RHODS, depending on who you want to ask specifically, right? But the idea is it's essentially a meta operator that sits above other operators and really combines them into a coherent, integrated environment at the end of the day. It's based on things like Anaconda and IBM Watson and Intel OpenVINO and so on and so forth. But the idea is that having an IDE where data scientists can actually, use their training models that they build, and then interact also with application developers, data engineers, collaborating a full life cycle of intelligent applications. And we're really trying to streamline that because, prior to working at Red Hat, I worked at FICO, and most people know FICO is credit scoring, but really FICO at the end of the day is like a gigantic data services company, right? They do everything from credit card applications to working with the TSA and other government agencies and stuff. But if you ever worked with data scientists, they're really brilliant at what they do, right? They're great about building data training models, but they're really not technology focused, and having a way to bridge that gap between software developers, application developers to collaborate with these data scientists and data engineers to build new solutions to take to market faster. I think that's going to be really, really exciting. And so it's going to be, made available on the Open Data Hub, which is an open source community project. But yeah, we'll include a little bit more information on that in some of the slides that we'll share out, at a later date and time. But I'm super excited because I think AI and ML it is definitely the future, right? Every company that I'm talking to is excited about doing something with whether they're logistics, whether they're oil and gas, whether they're dealing with transportation. Everyone wants to figure out ways of automating and using artificial intelligence and machine learning, whether it's at the edge, telco, right? Everyone's super excited about using 5G and tying stuff into it like that. So I thought it was a huge announcement, and I was really excited about that as well.
That's cool. Yeah, and just, staying on the machine learning topic, but talking about how we've integrated together, with Azure Arc, we've now have, Azure machine learning that we can push out to the edge or push out to other Kubernetes distros, including OpenShift. And so what's nice about this is now you could, from one single pane of glass with Azure Arc, not only can you see your OpenShift clusters that are maybe running on-prem, maybe closer to the edge where you're gathering some of the data, and then you can take some of that data from the machine learning and put it into the cloud as well, and have this nice hybrid environment. And alongside that, you can also see RHEL instances, running on-prem and in Azure. So you have kind of this single pane of glass where you can see all of your workloads, not just containerized.
Yeah.
When you're working with customers and you're talking to them about them using Azure, with Red Hat products, what's one of the top things that they really like about what we've integrated? And it doesn't have to just. I know we talk about containers a lot because that's one of our passions. But Is there what other things are they kind of looking at? Is there a big demand for SQL on RHEL? And is this mostly on-prem, or is this just is it also in Azure?
Yeah, so SQL on RHEL comes up quite often lately, especially with big data clusters. A lot of customers aren't even aware that they could actually have mixed environments for SQL Server running on a combination of Windows and RHEL. So one, from a performance perspective, it's fantastic. From a management perspective, it's fantastic. But then on top of it, you can actually have these mixed clusters, and to the database admins on the back end, really, it's completely transparent, right? It's just SQL running on RHEL. It's really easy to install. It's like a single line item to actually install and get the database up and running. And you could run mixed mode clusters. And that also, what we've looked at, for the customers that I've been dealing with, especially when you're talking about tens or hundreds of nodes, it's actually significantly cheaper as well. And then you also have other companies, that maybe right now they're primarily a Linux shop, but now they've inherited another company, or some of their databases are running on SQL Server that are kind of more legacy, and they want to move them over to next generation SQL Server, and they want to run them all on Linux. And so being able to run that on RHEL and have full support and full level of transparency, forwards and backwards compatibility, I think that's really important. And I'm seeing this across hybrid, across on Azure in their own data center, a little bit of both, right? For high availability, they might be specifically running those databases in two different locations. But it's been really fantastic for everyone. And I think, again, going back to the big data clusters thing, we're just really seeing a lot of customers starting to adopt, those kind of big data cluster standards. So
that's cool. I got to tell you, I can't say that I have to say that can't be overstated too much or understated too much, because I used to do an incredible amount of very large migrations into the cloud. One of the biggest issues we run into would be large data migrations from SQL on-prem, be it Oracle, usually Oracle, to Azure, and the bigger hurdles were always SQL. And it really does make it a lot easier just to do SQL on RHEL, and it just works. It simplifies a lot of the harder things to do. Oh, we have another question. Okay, here you go.
Right, so our tools to assist. Okay, so I'll just read it. So are the tools to assist with the migration to RHEL? Are there tools to assist migration to RHEL? Nick.
That's kind of a tricky question, Anonymous. No. Yeah. So when you say assist with migration to RHEL, do you mean from another Linux operating system, or do you mean specifically from Windows? Or I guess I'm trying to understand. We have a ton of migration tools, right, to help you move. We also have a ton of professional services as well, but we have a ton of tooling to actually help you lift and shift and move, applications over to run on RHEL. And then obviously validate that the performance of them is good. I would just need a little bit more information to know what you're moving from to be able to give you a little bit more information on what tools, would be available. So if you want to kind of either ping me after this is over, feel free to grab me and send me a note. I'm pretty easy to find. You could grab me on LinkedIn or anywhere else, or even just send me an email. But I'm more than glad to talk to you more about the different types of tooling that we actually have. Red Hat's always building tools to help with onboarding of customers from various operating systems or even environments.
Yeah,
so he was actually asking. He was actually asking specifically from Windows. Yep.
Oh, okay. I was not aware of that. So as far as migrating from Windows to RHEL, like the actual applications, not databases. For databases, yes, we have tons of tooling for databases, right? So if you're running SQL Server on Windows, literally you could turn on cluster mode, you can introduce SQL Server on RHEL into the cluster, migrate the data over, and actually decommission those old servers and bring them over. If you're looking at like .NET, you would probably be refactoring into .NET Core at that point in time, right, to go run it on RHEL. And then other applications, whether it's like Java, things along those lines, we have other tooling for that as well. So there's tons of tools that are available to help migrate some of that stuff over. What other questions do I see that come up quite often? I'm trying to stay away from the whole container thing because we've just talked so much about containers. I am really interested in talking more about like Azure Devops though, integration, like, like customers that you have that are using Azure Devops and they're also using, solutions like, I don't know, Ansible, right? Or whatever you want to consider to be integrating into like native Red Hat stuff. What are you seeing there, Jim? Like how are they using Azure Devops to kind of streamline their building of applications, to deployment of applications? Are they leveraging things like Arc and Ansible to do things like that across multiple different platforms, or what are they doing exactly that you've been seeing?
Yeah, so I'm seeing a big move to GitHub Actions actually. That seems to be one of the pivot points now with DevOps, moving to GitHub Actions and do that, and kind of moving away from Azure DevOps. I mean, Azure DevOps does a lot of things, but GitHub Actions tends to be kind of, I know it's the new and shiny thing, but that's why we're working on it with integrating into Arrow and into OpenShift, right? One thing I did want to bring up though, so that everybody knows, because we have a list of all the products that we work with Red Hat, is we're also working on stuff with Ansible with them as well. So Ansible, there's Ansible and JBoss, and all those that are going to be coming into the marketplace soon. And so I guess I'll pose a question back to you, Nick, since we only have a couple minutes left, is how are you seeing customers wanting to use Ansible in Azure per se? Maybe it's not Azure, maybe it's other clouds, but how are they thinking about using Ansible? Is this mostly just machine building, or are you seeing it as a way to actually deploy apps too?
So I think initially Ansible was always used, for the deployment purposes of like configuring and setting up installation of machines and applications and such, right? Now I'm seeing Ansible being more tightly integrated into like release engineering, managing drift of environments, scalability, right? So like, for example, we have Ansible playbooks. Like if you go to deploy a new node in SAP HANA, you can actually run an Ansible playbook and bring up an entire SAP HANA cluster in like 20 minutes. Instead of having to go through like a regular wizard or whatever, it can be completely automated. And obviously there's a lot of advantages to automation, right? You're decreasing, issues when it comes to humans, right? We all know people in general make mistakes. But Ansible is growing in itself, right? It's becoming more than just a thing of playbooks. It's becoming significantly more powerful when it comes to deploying applications, managing applications, tying into CI/CD stuff. I think we're just going to continue to see it grow. I put up a slide as well. So if you're interested in learning more about our partnership, please take a look at the following links. There's a ton of information there. You could always reach out to myself. You could reach out to Jim. You could reach out to Michael. We're more than happy to help in any way we can, and we greatly appreciate you guys coming and attending the session. And if you want to connect with Red Hat, or if you want to connect with Microsoft, these are some of the links as well. And I think that's pretty much it.
Great, thanks. Nice talking to you again, Nick.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody that attended, and you guys have a great day.